It was a warm Saturday evening in early June, the kind where laughter traveled freely through the open air and the scent of garden roses danced on the breeze. The backyard of Frank and Martha Sullivan's home had been transformed into a golden wonderland. Strings of lights hung overhead, soft music played in the background, and white-clothed tables overflowed with food, champagne, and congratulatory cards. Their children, now grown with children of their own, had pulled out all the stops to celebrate what everyone believed was a rare and beautiful milestone. 50 years of marriage. Martha stood near the podium, wearing a cream-colored dress with a gold shawl. Her silver hair was swept up in a gentle bun, her lipstick done just right. She looked calm, almost serene. Frank stood beside her in a navy suit. Smiling politely and clutching his glass, though his hand trembled slightly, Martha touched the microphone gently and the crowd quieted down. All eyes were on her. She began softly. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 50 years. It's a long time. Half a century of waking up next to the same person, laughing, arguing, sharing, forgiving." The crowd smiled, some couples nodding in recognition. Martha smiled too, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She continued. "Frank and I met at a diner when I was just 19. He had a crooked smile and a bad joke about meatloaf. I laughed, and somehow that laugh turned into a lifetime." Guests chuckled. Frank laughed too, though his eyes shifted toward the far corner of the yard, where a woman stood quietly, sipping wine. It was Carol. Friendly neighbor, long-time widow, and a woman everyone assumed was just a harmless part of the neighborhood furniture. Martha's voice remained steady. "Over the years, we built a home, raised children, buried our parents, and forgave each other for so many things." She paused. "But some things," she added, looking at Frank now, "some things can't be forgiven." The mood shifted. A quiet tension rippled through the crowd. Frank stiffened. Carol slowly lowered her wine glass. Martha lifted a small remote and clicked. A screen behind them, previously showing a looping slideshow of old family photos, suddenly changed. The next photo wasn't from their honeymoon. It wasn't even of their family. It was grainy, black and white, taken from a distance, but clear enough. It showed Frank. Standing outside Carol's back door, kissing her, gasps echoed around the yard. One guest knocked over a glass. Martha didn't flinch. She looked directly at her husband. "You told me you were helping her fix her garden bench, but it wasn't the bench you were nailing." 3 months before the party, Martha had been folding laundry when she found the first crack in the mirror of her marriage. It was a small thing, a text notification on Frank's phone. He'd left it charging on the kitchen counter, face up. She didn't mean to look, but it lit up right beside her. Just one message from C. It read, "Same time tomorrow. I'll wear that dress you like." At first, she told herself it was nothing. Maybe a joke. Maybe Carol had meant to text someone else, but that tiny, quiet seed of doubt had already taken root. Frank had been acting different for a while. He used to sit and drink tea with her after dinner, watch the news, argue about politics. Lately, he would leave the house without saying where he was going, mumble something about helping Carol with her lawn or fixing her shed. He'd come back smelling like her perfume that Martha never wore. He started sleeping on the edge of the bed, facing away from her, sighing when she touched his shoulder one afternoon. While he was at the grocery store, Martha opened the bottom drawer of his nightstand. It had always been messy. Loose change, old receipts, candy wrappers, but tucked in the back corner was a small envelope, sealed and slightly worn. Her fingers shook as she pulled it out. It was addressed to my love in a handwriting she didn't recognize. No name, no date. Just that simple message. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she slid it into her own drawer and started a small pile. Over the next few weeks, the signs piled up. She found a silver bracelet under the couch, too small for her wrist. She noticed Frank had set a new password on his phone. He said it was to keep the grandkids from playing games on it, but he always kept it turned over. Now, one Sunday, when he claimed he was at the hardware store, Martha drove by Carol's house. Frank's car was parked outside. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She needed more. She needed the truth to hurt him the way his lies had started to hurt her. So she waited and planned and watched. It was a Tuesday morning when Martha made the decision. She was tired of pretending, tired of second-guessing herself. She no longer wanted to be the wife who smiled through shame. So she picked up the phone and called a name she never thought she would need. Eddie Malone, a former police officer who now worked part-time as a private investigator for suspicious spouses and angry landlords. Eddie arrived at her door the next afternoon. He was in his late 60s, with sharp eyes and a face carved by years of disappointment. He didn't ask her why she wanted to hire him. He already knew. Martha handed him a small folder she had put together, photos of Frank's car parked near Carol's home, screenshots of suspicious messages, the sealed envelope she still hadn't opened, and a handwritten timeline of the last 2 months. Eddie flipped through the papers, then looked at her. "You want the truth, or just enough to embarrass him?" Martha didn't blink. "I want everything. And I want proof." For the next 3 weeks, Martha lived a double life. In the mornings, she baked cookies for the neighbors and chatted with her grandkids over FaceTime. In the afternoons, she waited for Eddie's updates, like a woman waiting for lab results. Each report cut deeper. Frank had been visiting Carol's house every Tuesday and Thursday. He'd started going inside around 2 p.m. and wouldn't leave until nearly 5. Sometimes he brought flowers, sometimes wine. One afternoon, Eddie sent her a photo, Frank and Carol sitting on her back porch, holding hands like teenagers. Another showed them kissing in Carol's living room, lights dimmed, blinds barely drawn. They weren't careful. They didn't think they needed to be. But what broke Martha wasn't the physical betrayal. It was the letter Eddie found in Carol's trash. It was torn in half, crumpled, but legible. A draft of something deeper, something more dangerous. "Frank, I'm tired of sneaking around. You said she would be gone by summer. If you don't tell her, I will. I love you. I can't be your secret anymore." Martha sat on the edge of her bed, letter in her lap, hands frozen. She felt something shift inside her. Not sorrow, not jealousy. Something colder, something louder. She realized in that moment that her husband hadn't just betrayed her. He had planned to erase her 50 years, a whole life together, and he was ready to toss it like an old receipt. She didn't cry. Not that night. Instead, she opened a drawer and pulled out the envelope she had kept hidden for weeks. She peeled it open slowly, like unwrapping a wound. Inside was a single card on the front. A picture of a red rose. Inside a short message in Carol's handwriting. "You make me feel young again. I can't wait until we can finally live without pretending." No name, no dates. Just that sentence. Just enough to confirm everything. Martha closed the card, placed it neatly beside the others, and stared at the ceiling. For 50 years, she had played the good wife, the faithful wife, the silent wife. But silence was over. Now she picked up a pen and started writing her anniversary speech. Line by line, lie by lie. The next morning, Martha stood at her kitchen window, stirring a cup of tea, her eyes fixed on Carol's house across the fence. The rose bushes between them were in full bloom. From a distance, everything looked calm, normal, peaceful. But underneath, things had shifted. Something had changed inside her, something final. She was no longer just waiting for the storm to pass. She was the storm. Now Frank came down the stairs, whistling. He kissed her cheek and asked if she wanted to join him for a walk later. She nodded with a soft smile. She had spent her whole life pretending. One more smile wouldn't hurt that day while Frank was out. Helping Carol with her storage boxes, Martha started making calls. She reached out to her oldest son, Brian, asking if he could help set up a digital slideshow for the party. She told him she wanted something special, not just the usual photos, she said. "I want to tell a story." Brian was happy to help. He said he'd bring his laptop next weekend to organize everything. Martha smiled and said thank you. She already had a folder on her own computer labeled Memories, filled not with baby pictures and vacations, but with time-stamped surveillance photos, copies of texts, and scanned letters. She renamed the folder Golden Years.mp4 and hid it inside another folder marked Anniversary Songs. 2 days later, Eddie Malone dropped off a flash drive. It's all there, he said, his voice low. Photos. A couple of videos. I followed them to the lakeside in last Thursday. He used your old credit card. Martha took the drive without flinching. Good, she said, slipping it into her cardigan pocket. Eddie paused. You sure you want to do this in front of everyone? She looked him straight in the eye. For 50 years, he performed. Now it's my turn that night, while Frank snored beside her in bed. Martha sat alone in the den. She rewatched the clip Eddie had recorded, Frank and Carol walking into the hotel, her husband holding the door for her like a gentleman, Carol laughing, clinging to his arm, wearing a red coat. Martha hadn't seen her wear before, but it wasn't the video that hit the hardest. It was what Eddie had said earlier, almost casually, as he handed her the drive. Not the first. You know, at first, Martha thought she misheard, but Eddie had nodded, eyes down. You didn't hire me to look into that, but I saw some things in his background years ago, back when he traveled for work. She didn't ask for more. She didn't need more. She realized that the man sleeping upstairs, the man who had kissed her forehead every night for 5 decades, had likely never stopped betraying her. Carol wasn't the beginning. She was just the last one stupid enough to believe she'd win. Martha didn't cry. She went into the attic and pulled down the box marked wedding keepsakes. Inside were love letters Frank had written her in the 60s, dried flowers from their first date, and a napkin from the diner where they'd met. She read one of the letters again, slowly, then fed it into the fireplace. One by one, she burned their past, not out of spite, but to make room. From now on, she would remember everything, but differently. Not as a love story, but as a warning. And then came the twist. 2 nights before the anniversary, Martha received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It showed Frank and Carol in her kitchen, hugging, but this time, they weren't alone. Another woman stood in the background, younger, blonde, maybe in her 40s. Her hand was on Frank's shoulder, laughing. Familiar. Too familiar. Martha stared at the picture. It was taken from inside Carol's house. Someone had been watching them. A second betrayal, a setup. Or maybe someone else had their own revenge plan. Martha felt the first flicker of real unease. She thought she had seen everything. She was wrong, and she was about to find out on the night of the celebration. She wasn't the only one with secrets to reveal. Martha stared at the photo long after the fire in the fireplace had gone out. The younger blonde woman in the background. There was something unsettling about her face, something that tugged at Martha's memory. Like a name she almost remembered in a dream, she turned the photo over. Nothing. No note, no signature. Just that silent image. The next morning, she made herself busy in the garden. She didn't want Frank to notice anything different. As he sipped his coffee and read the paper, Martha clipped roses and placed them neatly into a vase. Smiling like she hadn't just spent the night trying to decipher a photo sent by a stranger, but she couldn't shake it. Something was wrong with the way Carol had been smiling in that photo. Too stiff, forced even, and the hand on Frank's shoulder. It didn't look affectionate. It looked like control. That evening, while Frank was dozing off in front of the television, Martha walked across the yard and knocked on Carol's door. It was bold, risky, but her curiosity had grown sharper than her fear. Carol opened the door, surprised. Martha, you okay? Martha smiled gently. Just wanted to drop off some roses. They're blooming beautifully this week. Carol hesitated, then stepped aside. Sure, come in. The house smelled like lemon and something sweeter. Perfume thick in the air. The living room was perfectly arranged, but cold. Too clean. Martha sat for a few minutes, sipping tea, chatting lightly about weather, gardens, and grandchildren. Then she asked it. I saw a photo recently of you, Frank, and someone else. A younger woman. Know who I mean? Carol stiffened, her eyes narrowing just slightly. No, I don't think so. Maybe one of your granddaughters. Martha smiled. No, definitely not. There was a flicker, something dark in Carol's eyes that she tried to hide by sipping her tea. Martha leaned in. You're not the only one keeping secrets, Carol, and I'm not the only one watching. Carol stayed silent, but her fingers were gripping the edge of her cup too tightly. Martha stood up. Lovely visit. See you Saturday. As she walked back home, she knew she had struck a nerve. Carol wasn't just involved. She was hiding something, too. And that blonde woman in the photo. She wasn't random. She was part of something larger, a second affair, a shared lover, or worse, a setup that even Frank didn't understand. The next day, Martha called Eddie. Find out who the woman in that photo is, she said. Start with Carol. Dig into her past. Everything. Eddie hesitated. You think she's dangerous? I think she's smarter than she looks, Martha replied. And I don't think Frank's the only one lying to me. While Eddie got to work, Martha's son, Brian, came over to help with the slideshow setup. He connected her laptop to the projector, asking her which folder had the anniversary pictures. Martha pointed. That one. The Golden Years folder. He clicked it open, saw the fake song titles, and laughed. You really organized this? She smiled. Just wait until you see the final track. Brian didn't notice the second USB drive tucked beneath the table, the one that held the real show. That one would be plugged in last, just before the cake was cut, when everyone's eyes would be glued to the screen. But that plan now had a new layer. Martha wasn't just going to expose her husband. She was going to expose Carol too. And maybe, just maybe, figure out what the hell was really going on behind that neighborly smile. Because this wasn't just a love affair anymore. It was a web, and Martha had finally stopped being the fly. She was now the spider. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn as the Sullivan house lit up like a wedding hall. Gold balloons swayed gently above the tables. A live quartet played soft jazz, white lights flickered on the fence, and the air buzzed with laughter, compliments, and the clinking of glasses. It was the kind of party people would remember, though not for the reasons they thought. Martha stood at the top of the back porch steps. Looking down at it all, she wore a floor-length champagne-colored dress, simple but elegant. A brooch Frank had given her on their 20th anniversary gleamed on her shoulder. She looked radiant but calm, too calm, like a match waiting to be struck. Frank moved through the guests, smiling, thanking everyone for coming, hugging old friends. He seemed lighter than he had in weeks. Maybe he thought he was finally in the clear, that the deception had been buried beneath decades of loyalty and Martha's quiet nature. He was wrong. Carol arrived late. She wore a navy blue dress and her signature red lipstick. Her smile was bright, but her eyes flickered nervously the moment she saw Martha. It lasted only a second, but Martha caught it. She had become an expert at reading cracks and smiles. Martha walked over with practiced ease. Carol, you made it. Carol nodded. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Martha leaned in slightly. No, I bet you wouldn't. As Carol turned toward the drink table, Martha whispered low and cold. You're not the only woman Frank lied to. Carol froze for just a second. That was all Martha needed. The evening moved forward like a parade of perfection. Guests gave short toasts, laughing over memories. Grandchildren performed a song. Family members cried. The air smelled of roses and roasted lamb. But underneath it all, a pulse was quickening, a slow, steady rhythm of dread. And then it was time for the final toast. Brian stood up and announced, Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a very special message from our mother. 50 years of love, strength, and sacrifice. Mom, take it away. Martha walked up slowly, her heels silent on the wood. She took the mic in her hands, steady as stone. Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for being here tonight. 50 years. That's half a lifetime. A lot of memories, a lot of trust. She paused, scanning the crowd. Frank smiled nervously. Carol looked down at her hands. I thought about what to say tonight. I thought about quoting poets, sharing stories, thanking the man I married for being my partner, my rock, my one and only. She looked at Frank. But then I remembered something more important. Truth. That's what marriage is built on, right? Truth. The crowd was quiet now. No more clinking glasses, just silence. She raised the remote. And since tonight is all about memories, I thought I'd share a few of mine. She clicked the button. The screen behind her lit up. The first few photos were sweet. Their wedding day, holding their first child, Martha, in her 20s on the beach. Guests smiled, relaxed. Then the screen flickered. And the next slide hit like a fist. Frank standing outside Carol's house, kissing her. Whispers exploded through the crowd. Someone gasped loudly. A woman dropped her wine glass. Martha's voice remained calm. This is Frank 3 months ago, visiting our neighbor Carol. Not for gardening. Frank stood up abruptly. Martha, what the hell are you doing? She raised a hand. I'm not done. The next slide showed them entering the lakeside inn. Another showed a note. You make me feel young again, Martha continued, her voice colder. He told me he was helping her move furniture. He told me he was tired. Too tired for dinner. Too tired for dancing. She looked around at the crowd, but he wasn't too tired for her. Frank shouted. This is insane. You're ruining everything. Martha stepped down slowly, mic still in hand. No, Frank, you ruined it. I'm just letting everyone watch. And just before she turned the screen off, she clicked one more time. A new photo, not from Eddie, but from the envelope. The photo of Frank, Carol, and the mystery woman in the background. Martha looked at Carol now, her eyes sharp as razors. Recognize her? Carol's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Martha spoke again. Calm but thunderous. I don't know who she is yet, but I will, and I suggest you both enjoy this party because it's the last one you'll ever be invited to at my house. She dropped the mic and walked away. The yard exploded into chaos behind her, and still she didn't look back because the war had just begun. The night didn't end with applause. It ended with silence, then panic. Frank stormed out first, face red and furious, yelling that Martha had lost her mind and that this was emotional terrorism. No one followed him, not even their children. Carol slipped away moments later, avoiding eye contact, heading straight to her car without saying a word. Guests whispered, avoided Martha's eyes, or hugged her awkwardly before leaving early. But Martha didn't care. She didn't need anyone's pity. She had burned 50 years of betrayal in front of the world, and for the first time in her life, she felt free. The next morning, the backyard still smelled faintly of roses and shame. A few half-deflated balloons bounced lazily in the breeze. Martha stood in her robe, sipping black coffee, staring at the torn napkins and tipped-over chairs. Like a general surveying a battlefield, her phone buzzed. It was Eddie. I found her, he said. The blonde woman in the photo. Martha sat down slowly. Who is she? Eddie cleared his throat. Her name is Lena Howard. 43. She used to live 2 towns over. Guess what? She's Carol's niece. Martha blinked. Niece. Not by blood. Her brother's stepdaughter, but close enough, lived with Carol for about a year back in her 20s. Trouble from the start. Rehab, a DUI, and a minor fraud case 5 years ago. Martha felt a cold knot settle in her stomach. What's she doing in Carol's kitchen? That's the strange part. She's listed as working at a private elder care agency, the kind that handles wills, finances, end-of-life planning. Martha sat up straight. Carol doesn't have kids. No siblings she's close with. She's not dying. Exactly, Eddie said. But Lena's signature is on 2 documents filed recently. One of them a power of attorney form naming her guardian in case of mental decline. The other a revised while Martha's stomach turned. Carol wasn't just having an affair, she was setting something up or being used. And suddenly, the pieces started to shift. Maybe this hadn't been about love at all. Maybe Frank wasn't just weak. Maybe he was being played. And if Lena was involved in financial scams before, what else was she manipulating now? That night, Martha couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, replaying every neighborly favor, every potluck dinner, every smile Carol had given her over the fence. She thought about the photo again. How Carol's smile didn't look joyful, but trapped. How Lena wasn't just in the background. She was watching, calculating. It was no longer just about infidelity. It was about money, control, and maybe something far more sinister. So Martha did what she did best. She made a list. Frank, Carol, Lena, the money, the documents. She would trace every connection. And when she was done, she wouldn't just expose an affair. She'd uncover a scheme because betrayal hurts. But manipulation. That's war. Martha always believed betrayal was personal, an affair, a lie, a hidden letter. But as she stared at Lena Howard's name in the documents Eddie sent her, she realized something else. This wasn't just personal. It was calculated. A setup years in the making. She printed out every document Eddie had emailed. The power of attorney, the new will, bank transfers, even a strange notarized letter naming Lena as emergency executor. Carol's signature was at the bottom of each page, but something about it looked wrong. Too perfect, too identical. Martha reached out to an old friend, Joan, who had worked as a bank manager before retiring. She came over with reading glasses and strong opinions. This signature, Joan said, circling it with her pen, was probably copied or traced. The spacing's off. And these forms, this one's real. This one looks adjusted. Joan looked up. Martha, someone's playing with legal fire here. You should talk to a lawyer. But Martha wasn't ready for courts. Not yet. She wanted something better than lawsuits. She wanted the truth, all of it. So she called Eddie. I want to talk to Lena. Eddie sighed. That's not a good idea. Then make it happen. 2 days later, Martha walked into a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. Lena was already there, younger than she looked in the photo. But with eyes that didn't blink much and a smile that never reached her cheeks, she wore designer sunglasses indoors and stirred her drink like she had better places to be. You're Martha, she said, without looking up. And you're the woman in my neighbor's kitchen, Martha answered flatly. Lena tilted her head. What do you want? I want to know what you're doing with my husband, with Carol, with her will. Lena sipped her coffee. Carol's a lonely woman. I help her manage things. She trusts me. She trusted you enough to give you everything. Lena finally looked at her. Frank didn't fall in love with Carol. He fell into a trap. You should be thanking me. I was going to keep him and you out of this. Martha felt her spine go cold. So you admit it. Lena smiled just slightly. I admit nothing. I was helping Carol clean up her affairs. She was confused, frustrated. You know what aging does to people. Carol isn't confused, Martha snapped. She's scared. I saw it in her face. You're not helping her. You're using her. And if Frank thought he was seducing a neighbor, he was just another pawn. Lena stood up and leaned in close. You're smart, Martha. But be careful. The more you dig, the uglier this gets. Carol's not the only one with things to lose. Martha didn't flinch. I've already lost the man I married. I've got nothing left to fear. Lena smiled. Oh, I think you do. And with that, she walked out. Martha sat alone, hands clenched. Her tea had gone cold that night. She couldn't sleep. And the next morning, something else went cold, too. Carol's house, lights off, mail untouched, her car still in the driveway. By noon, police were there. By evening, the word had spread. Carol was missing. No note, no sign of struggle. Just her phone left on the kitchen counter beside a half-eaten apple. And suddenly, Martha's story wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about one disappearance. And Martha knew, deep in her gut, Carol hadn't run away. She had been silenced. For the first time in weeks, the Sullivan house was quiet. Too quiet. No calls from relatives, no awkward check-ins from neighbors. Just the heavy silence of a home sitting beneath a cloud of suspicion. Carol's disappearance had shaken the neighborhood. Police cars had come and gone. Officers knocked on doors, asked questions, took statements. Frank barely spoke. He sat in his study most of the day, nursing a drink and flipping through old newspaper clippings like he was trying to escape into the past. Martha didn't speak to him, not beyond what was necessary. The police called. "Dinner's on the counter. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for myself." Frank seemed smaller now, not the confident man who had lied to her face with charm, but a shadow of that man, a shell. But Martha didn't trust it. She knew men like him could cry and still be lying. And still, no one had seen Carol. Not her car, not her phone, not even Lena. But Martha had seen something else. She had seen enough. She went back to Eddie, armed with every document, every photo, and the cold certainty of someone with nothing left to protect. She laid it all on the table. The altered will, the power of attorney, the hidden relationship between Lena and Frank. Yes, that too. Because Eddie had found one last file, a transfer record, $75,000 moved out of a joint account Frank had opened years ago in a second bank under the name F.S. Wallace, his mother's maiden name. The transfer had happened 2 months ago. Destination: a private account in Lena Howard's name. Martha nearly vomited when she saw it. "Did you know about this?" she asked Frank that night. He looked at her with hollow eyes. It was supposed to be a short-term loan. She was helping Carol. "I didn't think it would matter." "You didn't think it would matter," Martha said, her voice trembling. "You were funneling money to the same woman who forged legal control over your mistress, and now she's missing." Frank didn't answer. That night, Martha packed a bag and left the house. She checked into a small motel outside town, one with no cameras, no noise, and no memories. She needed space. Not for grief, but for the final step. She opened her laptop. She uploaded everything. The altered documents, the surveillance, the bank records, even a secret audio recording she'd made of Lena's thinly veiled threats in the coffee shop. Then she sent it. Not to the police, not to her children, but to a journalist. Investigative reporter Olivia Tran, known for ripping into corporate fraud and high-profile cons, especially ones involving elder abuse and inheritance theft. She added a single line to the email. "Greater than you want a story? Start here. You'll find blood under the gold." Then she turned off her phone and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, finally able to breathe. 2 days later, the story broke online. Missing woman tied to inheritance fraud scheme. Husband and mistress named an explosive family reveal. It spread like wildfire. Martha's inbox filled with messages. People from the party, strangers, even women who had gone through the same kind of betrayal years ago, now writing to say you spoke for us. And just when she thought the storm had peaked, her phone rang again. It was the police. They had found something, a car in the lake, registered to Carol, inside one purse, one shoe, and in the back seat, wrapped in a towel, a burned contract, half legible. The name Lena Howard was still visible, but Carol was still missing. No body, no calls, no goodbye. And suddenly, Martha realized the war might be over. But the silence was just beginning. Weeks passed. The police dragged the lake again. Divers found scraps of clothing, torn plastic and the rusted frame of a folding chair, but no body. No bones, no sign of Carol Sullivan or Carol Watson, her maiden name, which Martha now knew had been used to take out a second life insurance policy just 6 months earlier. The journalist, Olivia Tran, ran 3 follow-up articles. One exposed Lena's fraud history, including a nursing home case that had been quietly settled years earlier. Another revealed Frank's offshore account, which had since been frozen. The third, more haunting, asked the question no one could answer. Did Carol disappear or was she disappeared? Martha watched it all unfold from the sidelines. Quiet still, as if she'd already said all she needed to. Frank was served with charges, financial conspiracy, identity fraud, and obstruction of justice. He was put under house arrest pending trial, a GPS monitor locked around his ankle. He looked like a ghost now. Pale, shaking, aging by the hour, their children had stopped speaking to him. Even Brian, who once worshipped his father, Martha returned to the house once. Just once. She walked through the rooms like a stranger, touched the frame of their wedding photo. She didn't cry. She simply placed a single note on the kitchen table. You never really fooled me. I just loved you too much to see the truth. Not anymore. Then she left for good. But the story wasn't done, because 3 months later, on a wet Thursday morning, Martha received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of Carol, alive, smiling, standing on a dock in what looked like Mexico. Behind her, waves, a sunset, and white Lena Zao, wearing sunglasses and holding a drink, looking directly at the camera. Written on the back in blue ink. One sentence. Sometimes to survive, you have to disappear first. Martha stared at it for a long time. She laughed. Not out of joy, but out of the sick, twisted poetry of it all. Carol wasn't dead. She wasn't a victim. She had played her part beautifully. The will, the transfer, the missing act, the silence. It had all been part of their plan. A performance of disappearance and Martha. She had delivered the perfect distraction, the spectacle, the storm, the confession party that drew every eye. She had unknowingly helped them vanish. But she didn't regret it, because in the end she had exposed Frank for what he was, stripped him of power, of pride, of the perfect mask he wore for 5 decades. She had walked out free. Not untouched, but awake. And as she looked at the photo one last time, she smiled. Because even though Carol had disappeared, Martha had survived. And sometimes that's the better ending. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.